can kind of talk both in your direction and the direction of the mic this way.
Perfect.
Maybe I'll keep my little sticky note in my pocket.
Need to burp not in the, in the mic. Okay. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I need to zoom in. I can't see my words. Hello, my name is Erin, and I am currently working as one of the Office of Equity Diversity's multimedia interns. Today I'm joined with
Orion Levy, he, him.
Last week we had Elena on the podcast, and we discussed some things around the topic of pronouns. Today we're here to do the same. Last week we got to hear a little bit about Elena's story with pronouns and what pronouns mean to them. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your journey with pronouns and what pronouns mean to you?
Yes, so I identify as a trans man. When I was coming out to friends, it was right around before COVID hit, so I feel a lot of people it kind of coincided with the time that a lot of people were putting their pronouns on their social media pages. Yeah. It was the first time that I saw it be so visible, and it was a tool that kind of united people, shows that is used to show if you do not say to people that you are transgender, that you maybe support people who are. And this was sort of pivotal for me because I, at the time, was not sure how I wanted people to refer to me. So I kind of jumped on the she/they bandwagon for a while, because for so long I felt like I just want people to call me anything but she. Yeah. But that was a really scary thing to ask for. And seeing for the first time that people were using pronoun sets, including pronouns that were not either she or he, exclusively just one, to see they included, made that part of me feel seen, where it's like, well, I don't want people to be referring to me as she. Yeah. Despite that, it was really hard to ask for kind of moving on. I still included she in my pronoun set for a while because I almost wanted people to choose the other option without me having to go out of my way to say, this is what I want. And I kind of backtracked a few times because of how scared I was. Mm-hmm. Even though it was to people who knew me, to people who were my friends, to people who supported me. And eventually I did realize, no, this is my body, my mind, they're telling me something, and I should try to listen to that, and I should try to honor that. And that's, the kind of mindset that I've cultivated over a couple years, but eventually I did switch to just he, him pronouns, because that's what made me feel the most, I guess, seen. That's what felt the most true to me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Last week we talked a little bit about why it's so important to respect people's pronouns, but of course people have slip-ups sometimes, or people make wrongful assumptions. What should you do if you make a mistake with someone's pronouns, or you accidentally misgender someone? In your opinion, what's the best way to go about mending that?
I've heard a really useful tool is this really simple phrase: just correct yourself and move on. Yeah. When you over apologize, you are shifting the attention from a person who has gone out of their way to be vulnerable, potentially, has already sort of had the lived experience of a trans person or someone who is gender nonconforming, who deals with this a lot. It's a lot of mental baggage. And you're shifting that to you, who has made this one-time mistake by over apologizing. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I think that's one of the worst things you can do, because then you're uncomfortable. You're making them uncomfortable. Just by saying, oh, sorry, she, and then moving on with your sentence. shows other people, one, that you understand, that you care, and also that you know that you are not like the biggest concern
Yeah.
in the room.
Exactly. And
It's more humble, I find.
yeah, I get that. And I feel like it's almost like a little patronizing to
Yes.
over apologize. Like they don't necessarily want to hear all that. They just want to be like, "Oh, wrong. Please do this," and then move on.
It's so much better to acknowledge, like, oh no, I did make a mistake,
Yeah.
than to not say anything at all. I think that anyone would prefer for an ally to do that. One of the things that stands out to me the most about this is that when someone misgenders a cis person, it's so like easily
Yeah.
treated correctly. It's so easily like, oh, of course I got that wrong. It's never questioned in the way that it can be around a trans person. With a trans person, it's like, well, I don't really have to say anything.
Yeah.
I find that there's sort of this mentality of or feeling of discomfort when we are talking about or around a trans person that there isn't when we're talking about a cis person or even like a dog. People
Yeah.
are so willing to like not misgender your
that's
dog.
true.
But when it's like you, a person that they know, it can be harder for them, and I don't know why.
Yeah, that is so weird. I never really thought about it like that, but that is pretty crazy. Obviously, as undergrad students, we're not that old. But just like in our lifetime, just because I feel like our generation has had a lot of change and experienced like a lot of big events. Like, how do you think you have seen society's understanding of pronouns and like the use of them evolve over like your lifetime?
Hmm. I think that people sort of made the connection for themselves in terms of understanding the definition of a pronoun. I feel like that is not something that I carried with me through like elementary school. Like I'm sure our teachers covered it because it's like a basic part of language. But I feel like people went through a sort of mental revolution of understanding, okay, what is this thing and why is it important for me to use and define it clearly?
Yeah.
I think I've seen that evolution in a way that I think is productive for trans people. We are not always guaranteed to be in a position where we have to explain to other people what a pronoun is and why you might be including that somewhere in a profile of yours or introducing yourself that way. And I think that that is, again, like a step in the right direction. It's very comforting to me to see someone who I struggle to say like who is cis like 100% because I'm not the kind of person who wants to impose that on other people. And I think that that's another thing that sharing our pronouns, making our pronouns visible, solidifies for me. Until you tell me your pronouns, I don't know what they are.
Yeah, like
I don't know what you're.
assume.
Yeah, but it's like this goes for anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't know anything about your experience until I ask you, and I think that that's part of why the practice of sharing pronouns is so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I think that that is hopefully kind of like collectively felt.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. I feel like I see more people feeling that way as we like spread more information, especially since in our generation we have social media and the internet and all that stuff where we can spread helpful information, but at the same time it can also spread such harmful information. So do you think social media has played a role in like the visibility of using gender like using non-conforming pronouns for either the better or the worse?
I think that it has, in terms of like they them pronouns. I think that it does get more visibility online than it may in person. I think that even if you are encountering people who use or want to use they them pronouns in real life, it can be hard to share that because there's a lot of stigma around transness and around gender nonconformity. It can be hard even if we're going around in a classroom sharing our pronouns. In certain environments, you may not feel comfortable sharing that in the same way that you might on social media.
Yeah.
It might be easier if you're using multiple sets of pronouns to not share all of them in certain spaces. So then you're not going to be visible everywhere in person as gender nonconforming in the same way that you might when you are in control of your like online spaces. I think that it could have some of that like negative connotation with or like courtesy of people who want to share sort of this negative impression of gender nonconformity, people who are, more conformists who hold more of that binary gender ideology. I think that no matter what, people are going to have their identities, people are going to be visible in a way that is more positive in the end of the day than not.
Yeah. And I think I like how you said you can control your online spaces. Like when you're online, if you know that there's someone, maybe not a friend to you, but someone who maybe goes to if you're in high school, maybe goes to your school, and you know they don't respect like trans people or maybe just the LGBT community in general, like you can block them and then they don't have to see those posts. But then when you go to school and you're in the classroom and that person's across the room, like it can be hard because you don't know if like you're safe, or you just maybe you're not in the headspace to hear what they have to say about your pronouns, because it's not their business and it's not up for them to say. But online it can be scary when your account is public and you're like, wow, anyone can see this. But then it's also so easy to be like, well, now I'm just blocking these people and now they're gone.
Yeah.
And so kind of on the topic of like media and stuff like that, how do you feel about pronouns being represented in like movies, TV shows, and other media? Like, do you feel like there's enough representation in diversity as it relates to like LGBT characters and stuff like that? Or do you think that's something we still need to keep like striving to see a lot more of?
This is an interesting question because I think that it can be really useful in so many ways. If I'm thinking about like in the context of a documentary, it could be really useful, especially I am in a lot of sociology classes because my minor is gender studies. It can be really helpful for us to see along with a person's like name, like in their header, to see what pronouns they use. I would like to see that for everyone, every speaker, and not just speakers who are gender nonconforming or trans.
Exactly.
I think that in movies and other media like books, it can be a little more challenging because then you are going out of your way a little bit to sort of include it. That can be relevant to the topic. There are some like sort of plot lines where I can imagine that being a relevant thing to explore. But there's also sometimes where I feel like it can be woven in a way that it's like, well, we're just taking a detour from like the topic that I'm like interested in. But then again, like I think that I have read books where I've seen it incorporated in a way where it's like, oh, like we didn't spend that much time on it. Like this is so simple. And this, like I didn't realize how simple it could be until this author showed me that. So I think that it can be beneficial. I think it maybe isn't always necessary. Like you need to kind of like it's on that basis of like, does this story need it? But and I think that this also opens up a larger conversation of how we are casting and treating actors outside of the actual topic of the movie or whatever kind of media it is. Are we being respectful during interviews, and are we being respectful like even when we interact with them online? I think that there's a lot more to dig in real life almost. It feels, pronouns feel like a real life topic to me. That's why it can be a little bit jarring to see it in like media itself. I almost expect media to be a little bit more removed, but I do want to see more progress in how we utilize pronouns in the context of like hearing someone's perspective. I would love to see it on just like any like little header. I think that would be wonderful.
I think for me, like representation, I feel like it's nice when you see a trans actor just like starring in a role, but the role doesn't have anything to do with them being trans, not in a way to like, erase their identity or anything like that, but just to say, like, just because they're trans doesn't mean we have to harp on this. Like, they can just be a trans actor and play a role the same as a cis actor does, and we don't have to have the whole storyline woven around it because like they're just a normal person. You know, sometimes, like, again, that patronizing thing, it's almost like if it's not essential to the story or they don't want to share, like, we don't need to have that so highlighted.
I think that that's an important part of diversity in general.
Yeah.
Showing that we do see sort of the everyman
Mm-hmm.
as any sort of identity. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to, or rather, an actor's career doesn't have to hinge on the identities that they
Mm-hmm.
hold.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'd love to see a trans actor in like a romantic lead that doesn't harp on them being trans, or like that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't affect the story, just to show like it's just normal. It's just everyday life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Last.
like trans characters where being trans does not necessarily have an effect on the plot. I'd love to see a
Yeah.
trans romance
Exactly.
where like it is featured, but it's not central to the plot that they
Mm-hmm.
are trans.
Exactly.
I think that both of those things can be very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Elena and I last week we talked about like why some people are so resistant to respecting non-conforming pronouns. Like, do you have anything to say about that topic? Like, maybe why people would be so resistant, or like how to handle with people who are resistant?